ultimately, I died, and it was not what I thought it would be like at all. There was an angel that showed up and was like speaking to me, but like they weren't talking out loud. They were just like talking to my mind. And they just said, Brooke, it's not your time yet. We really need you to go back. And they're like, but we can't make you go back. You're already here.
Hmm.
Your choice. But your story is not over yet. There's still things for you to do. And I chose to come back to my body in paralysis, in the pain. I chose to come back in the waiting and the unknown. I had no idea when my surgery was going to be. I didn't know how much worse I was going to get. I came back to my body and I chose to live life, even with paralysis, even with the migraine, even with the unknowing. And I'm so grateful that I did.
Welcome to the Confident Mompreneur podcast, where you can find solid advice along with warm guidance on motherhood, business, relationships, health, wellness, and everything you need to help add to your confidence and zest for life. And with interesting guests from all around the world, you'll hear real and relatable stories with impact and nuggets of wisdom to help you or the mompreneur meet the challenges of life with clarity and success. Now let's welcome your mompreneur host, Carrie Blaney.
Welcome on this morning, Brooke. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to join you.
Brooke and I met through Kira Brinton, who we just had on last episode, actually. So this is kind of funny that you're coming on next. But through her Mosaic network. And I told you guys the women in there are just incredible. And all of them have these amazing stories and things that they're doing. So when I heard a little bit of Brooke's story, I was like, okay, I gotta have her on. So I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that group is full of just powerhouse women, and it is fun to be involved in it and to be surrounded by women who are go-getters and world shifters, change makers.
Very much so. And I think it's very interesting. Like, Kira has this knack for bringing in people that are like going through major trauma, have been through major trauma, whatever, and like they're pulling something good from that hurt and, becoming those change makers that you're talking about, which is just incredible.
Yeah, she really does. She has a knack for that. For people who are turning their pain into purpose.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So, for those who don't know you, do you want to start us out by introducing yourself a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your family, and all the good things?
Yeah, okay. I'm Brooke Andersen. I have been married for 13 years now to the most supportive husband, and he really is my rock through this. I could not have gone through everything I've done without him. We have 4 miracle boys, and they were all born within 5 years, very close together. So they range between 7 and 12 right now, and we are currently homeschooling this year. So you might hear a little squealing in the background. My mother, and they are here. um, I'm an author, so my book's just come out. It's Through Fire and Grace, Rising from the Depths of Despair to Live a Life of Hope. And my message in that is really to give hope, and not just that, but say like, you can live life with all these things. And I'll go into depths about that in a little bit. And I am shortly launching a podcast. So we'll switzy roozies, and you can be a guest on mine soon. How about that?
Sounds great to me. I love doing this switchy routine.
Yeah. I am really passionate about helping others find hope and healing in multiple aspects of life. I am a postpartum psychosis survivor with my fourth child, and I have just overcome 5 years of chronic illness, really 15 years of chronic illness, but chronic, like debilitating last 5 years, bed rest, extremely ill. Um, the doctors just told my husband and I, like, prepare for her to be in a wheelchair. And you have degenerative disorder, just settle for the best quality of life that you can have. And I had a cervical fusion. In September of 2019, in about 5 more days, it will be the 5th anniversary of me going into paralysis.
That is crazy. Wow.
And so I was a long distance runner at the time. And the week before I had ran 8 miles. And over that week, I mentally, neurologically deteriorated extremely quickly. And by the weekend, all I could do was blink. I could not speak. I could not move my arms. I could not move my legs. I was in complete paralysis. And the doctors told me it was my postpartum depression returning. And we just laughed. We're like, no, something more is going on here.
Yeah.
And it started the next form of me having to advocate for myself through this chronic illness journey, discovering what was really wrong, finding the people that could help me. And for me, that meant I actually traveled to Barcelona, Spain to have a cervical fusion.
Wow.
And my recovery was very slow. It took a couple years to really recover. And I lived in a neck brace for 4.5 years. I've only been out of my neck brace since May of this year, since May of 2024.
That is so crazy. Yeah.
So,
I mean, your entire story is just like you said, just a fight to advocate for yourself through everything. And I think that's the really most important message within that is like, as women, especially, I think a lot of our healthcare stuff is kind of blown off, or it's just like, oh, it's all in your head, right? And
yeah,
so to be able to like know your own body and be able to advocate for yourself is huge, huge.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's go back a little bit. You said with your fourth son, who is now 7, you suffered through some postpartum psychosis. What was that like? I have had several friends actually who have gone through that, and it is horrific and just like so mentally taxing, especially when you now have 4 kids within like a very short time period that you're trying to take care of.
Yeah. It's strange that you actually know multiple people because it's uncommon. I don't think I'd go as far to say rare nowadays, but it's a highly uncommon diagnosis. And so for me, he was a surprise baby, which I really struggled with. I had just worked really hard to get fit after my third in less than 3 years.
Yeah.
And lose 50 pounds of baby weights from all these pregnancies just piling on each other. And I had just lost all that. I was feeling so strong. And really, one of the struggles was I was feeling the healthiest I'd felt in a long time. And pregnancies are extremely rough on me. I have PICC lines, throwing up all 9 months. I have home nurses.
You have hyperemesis?
Yes.
I did too. And it's the worst.
Yep. And so, I mean, I was throwing up before a pregnancy test was positive most of the time. And for him, I actually didn't throw up till 5 weeks.
You're like, thank goodness.
I know, that sounds awful. I didn't throw up till I was 5 weeks along. That was like such a streak. I was like, maybe this one will be different. Nope. No, I just made it to 5 weeks. And then I had my appendix. I had appendicitis when I was 17 weeks pregnant with him.
Oh gosh.
It was the one time my genetic disorder like worked for me, even though I didn't actually even know I had this genetic disorder yet. And my appendix quadrupled in size, but didn't burst. Normally they birth at double, and I was quadruple.
Wow.
Before like anyone had even come and prepped me for the surgery, the surgeon was in there, like rolling me out of the room. And I was like, "Where are we going?" And he's like, "Oh, the nurses haven't told you? Like you're going to surgery like right now." And I was like, "Can I call my husband? He's home with our kids." Um,
I should probably tell somebody.
so I had that was a really rough experience, and I blamed my baby for it because it was pregnancy induced. They said, in fact, it probably was starting at the end of my last pregnancy, but because then I gave birth so early, it took the pressure off my appendix and it probably unkinked essentially what was going on. And now that I was 17 weeks, there was too much pressure on the appendix again, and it had recreated the problem. Um, so I had surgery and they sent me home afterwards. I had
Surgery while you're pregnant is also terrifying. You're like,
that's so hard.
am I gonna die? Is my baby gonna die? Like, it's so rare to have something like that happen, and just like all of the things that go through your head as you're going through that.
To complicate it, I actually have irritable uterus. So I always went into preterm labor by 20 weeks.
Really?
And I was 17 weeks. The earliest I'd gone into preterm labor unprovoked was 18 weeks. So I was a week shy of the earliest I'd gone into labor.
So it very easily could have.
And so just being around the uterus could have triggered labor. So they were originally going to hold me in labor and delivery, but then they said, honestly, if you go into labor, we can't do anything anyway. So we're just going to send you home. And I'm like, so you just want me to give birth to my baby at home because you can't do anything at the hospital anyway for me? Okay. So the surgeon was actually a father of 9 sons.
Wow.
And he said, I am just going to pray that I can get in and out as fast as possible without complications to be as minimally invasive and so you're not under as long and so we don't irritate your uterus. He did the surgery in half the time he normally performs it in.
Wow.
And that was like one miracle. I did not go into labor. Was a second miracle. I made it a couple more weeks in my pregnancy before I started to have preterm labor. And I carried that baby till 37 weeks.
Wow.
And
now you have 4 very loud and busy little boys.
The one that's screaming in the background. And I had the most empowering birth with him. He was a water birth and I caught him and I brought him out of the water and it was just the most amazing birth. And it really felt healing to me because I had just not connected with him in the womb like I had my other kids. But then at 2 weeks old, the other shoe dropped and it was the first time I had my first hallucination. And I was standing in front of my bedroom window, rocking him one night. And I just could swear there was a guy outside who wanted to kill me. And I just stopped moving. And stopped speaking, stopped moving, just holding still. And I was like, this is part of me was like, this is really weird. And the other part of me is fully convinced he's there,
Yeah.
And my husband's laying in the bed and I say nothing to him. And I just remember that one so plain because it was part of my brain was still being logical and was like, what? Why do you think that?
Right.
The rest of my brain is full on panic freeze, Yeah. And it just escalated from there. My husband knew I was depressed, but postpartum depression was really common for me. Postpartum anxiety was really common for me. And so he really just thought it was postpartum depression and in a few months we would be through it. And it just did not get better. And the first time I thought about harming my child or myself, really, he was about 3.5 months old. I had made it quite some time, honestly. And it's terrified me. And I quickly removed myself from the situation. And after that point, like every time my husband just left the house, I would just cling to him crying. And he was just like, what are we going to do? Like, I got to go to work. And I was just crying because I didn't know if I'd see him again. I didn't know what he was going to come home to. And I just kept going. God had put so many things in my life, like, that just kept tugging me along. I like my son had a lot of allergies and I had to nurse him. I could not find a formula that he wouldn't react to for a very long time. And so I would like get my kids snacks, put them in front of their favorite TV show, strap my baby into his swing, be like watching the clock to be like timing my disposal with my husband's arrival from work so that my kids wouldn't find me and they wouldn't be left without a parent for very long. And then like my baby would start screaming and I would know he's hungry, even though he was just fed an hour ago. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't leave a screaming kid for him. Like, and I'd go pick up my baby. My maternal instincts are really one thing that saved me through that, which is so bizarre because I like had so much resentment towards him for causing this, which isn't true. His birth was the thing that triggered the experience, but it wasn't his fault. He's an infant. He didn't cause the experience. It was a fascinating concept when I first was in therapy later and was all like, like sometimes like people don't cause things, situations just happen. And I was like, wow, actually that's true. Sometimes like
Yeah.
people don't cause everything.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's so much
it's so
easier
interesting
to be
though,
angry.
yeah, and it's so interesting the way that our brains work. It feels like it needs to find like something to latch onto, to put the blame onto,
Yeah.
whether that's us or somebody else. But like the fact that it's just happening and there's no reasoning for it is like really hard for us to understand, especially when like you went through so much through that process. That's an easy place to like place blame. But then, like you said, like also the maternal instincts, it feels like it's pulling you in two separate directions. You're like, I hate this baby. They caused this. Like, I want to kill myself. I am thinking about harming them. Like, but also on the other side, like, my baby's screaming. I have to take care of him. Like, I need to go and feed him. And just like that constant, like,
It was
back
a
and
constant
forth in
battle.
your brain. Yeah.
It was as exhausting as having psychosis, the battle I had inside me to be a mother and despising my child.
Yeah.
I didn't bond with him. I didn't know that I loved him, but I showed up as if I did. And I didn't treat him any different than my other kids. I co-slept with him. I baby wore him. He was exclusively breastfed until he was about 6.5 months old when I found a formula that he could have. And so at that point, it was like weaning him was the thing that I was holding on to. Like, okay, maybe this will get better after I wean him. And then my husband became a full-time real estate agent. I started to express how severe I was and he needed to be around more. And he'd been doing real estate part-time at the time and had a day job. We took a giant leap of faith, sold our house, downsized. And so then I was like, okay, I've got to pack. I've got to unpack. Like, I just kept myself so busy.
That were, keeping you busy and out of your head as much.
And then spring came and we had to put in a yard. And my husband was like, that was like the best thing. Like we can kind of joke about it now because we're so many years past it, right? This was 6 years ago. And like, he was like, it was like kind of great because you were running so hard away from those demons. You worked so hard on that yard. And I hardly had to do anything. Like I was out there with you and you were just like the workhorse. And if the baby started crying, you're like, please go get the baby the bottle. Please go put him down for a nap. I'll keep digging this hole under the sidewalk. And then that August is when I really admitted to my husband what had been going on. Our baby had just turned 1. And I wrote him a letter. I was so scared and I knew I wouldn't be able to tell him with my words because I would just break down. I wrote him a 2-page letter and I texted him while we were in separate rooms tucking our kids in. And I said, babe, we really need to talk tonight. And he was like, oh, okay. Like, I've never done this before. And we get to the room and I shut the door and he's like, okay, what do we need to talk about? And I just like threw this letter at him and started sobbing. And he read the letter and he looked at me. He just said, it's going to be okay. I won't let you hurt yourself. We will get you help. It's going to be okay. And we spent months trying to get me help. We spent months. And we were calling therapists saying that they were specialized in postpartum and they weren't calling us back. We were calling doctors and having months waits to get in. And we were also like totally naive at how severe I was at the same time. Like I knew I was and I didn't know I wasn't,
Yeah.
because we got this cancellation with a psychiatrist like for the next day, but they were going to charge us $400 for it. And my husband's like, we can't pay $400 for this last minute cancellation. Not like realizing that like I really was in a crisis
Yeah.
and that a normal wait was 8 weeks out. And so people like the one doctor I'd gone into, they were like, you realize like you should not have passed that up. I'm like, what? It was $400. Like, why should I have not passed that up?
Right.
And so then for a second they like questioned, like, are you guys like okay? Do you realize? And we're like, no, like we just really didn't realize we weren't in this world yet.
Yeah.
And
And with how rare everything is with that, you probably didn't have anybody that you've ever seen go through that or talk about that, especially because I think postpartum is hard enough to talk about because there's so much shame in like admitting like I'm not bonding to my baby. I'm like really struggling with like my mental health. Like all of those things are very taboo to talk about. So like you're just like pushing through. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here, but at least I'm doing something.
yeah. So it was January of 2019 when my baby was 18 months old when I was finally hospitalized. Yeah.
That's such a long time to like go through everything. I mean, really alone because you didn't even talk to your husband until your baby was a year old.
Over a year.
Yeah. And
It's
so
just a
do you
miracle.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's a miracle that you made it through those 12 months by yourself. Why do you think, especially because like as we've been talking, you've mentioned like how great your husband is, how supportive he is. I mean, even his reaction to the letter, like we're gonna tackle this together. Why do you think it took you 12 months to be able to talk about it and admit it to even your husband?
I think that is the power of shame.
Yeah.
I really know how unusual it is to have such an amazing husband. I know. Statistically, I come from like a very broken home and I shouldn't have married such an amazing man. I should have continued the cycle that was in my generational family, And especially being abused and experiencing sexual assault as a teenager, like that's the pattern I should have married into. Yeah. And I didn't. Thank God. It was a miracle that I married my husband. I thought there was two like main conscious thoughts I know of during this time of why I chose not to tell him. One, I hoped that given time it would get better on its own. I was eating healthy. I was exercising. I was doing the things.
Doing all the things right.
Yeah, I was taking like supplements that are supposed to help. Like I was doing all the things to try and naturally help myself out of it. And I didn't really know it was psychosis until about 6 months into it. It's when I first Googled my symptoms.
You went to Dr. Google on that one.
I don't know like if that was smart or not, but it did give me a little bit of a reality check, which is one reason I weaned my son, is because I realized I had something really severe. And I was hoping that if I could wean him and get through the winter, like that naturally by the time he was like a year old, I would be out of it. Ugh. So there was a lot of shame and then a lot of hope of just like, if I can get through this, no one needs to know about it.
Yeah.
And once I got through summer and I was still running down the street, running away from this imaginary man, I knew it wasn't going anywhere without help.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like that January, it got so bad. Like he had removed, like obviously the guns from our house. He had been through the police academy. And so like we had weapons in the house. But I actually am extremely allergic to painkillers.
Mm.
I stop breathing with painkillers. I can't take pain medication. So we actually had to remove tons of medications from our house because even our kids' medications, I couldn't give our kids painkiller. My husband kept it all locked away out of the house, even. And he didn't keep any adult painkiller in the house. And he, like the week I was hospitalized, it got so bad, like he couldn't let me walk to the bathroom by myself. He checked my mouth before I drank water, even though he had removed things from the house. Like he was literally babysitting me. It had just gotten so severe. I had started an antidepressant medication that had made it worse.
Mm.
And so I willingly walked into the hospital because I loved my husband so much. I could not handle the thought of him remarrying out of necessity for raising our children. I couldn't imagine him sharing this relationship we have with someone else. And I couldn't imagine him being left to find me and feeling like, what if I could have done something else?
That is so hard. And thank you for sharing that, because I think it's one of those things that, like I said, is very taboo to talk about and goes untalked about a lot. But honestly, for me, I've admitted myself to the psychiatric unit twice. And both times I did it because of other people, because of the love that I had for other people,
Yeah.
because at that point there was no love left for myself, you know?
Okay.
And so you have to hold on to that just like little bit of something that's still left in you that's saying to fight. And it's really hard to do and really hard to admit when we're to that point and really need a ton of help.
Yeah, it really is hard. The other thing is I feel like people think that you're just like better after you're hospitalized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really not. It was 9 months. Well, it was like 8 months of work, of going to therapy once to twice a week, seeing a psychiatrist, getting on multiple medications, balancing it all.
It's kind of just a jump start into
Yeah.
all the things that you then have to do. Like they're just there to like make you safe for a period of time so that you're not harming yourself. Like in those critical moments, they're getting you on medications, they're finding you therapists, they're doing all of the like critical care things to set you up for success after you leave. But that is not, it's just like a band-aid on it for the moment.
Yeah, and that's actually the description I use in my book. That's so funny.
Oh, really?
I
That's so funny.
the analogy I use in my book is that it is like a cracked fish tank that you're using band-aids to seal the cracks and keep the water in, but it won't.
That is so funny that I just happened to use that analogy, and that's exactly what you said.
Mm-hmm. But the cracks in the fish tank can't be stopped by band-aids, and it's still going to leak. And if it's not healed properly or sealed properly, you're going to end up with a dead fish. That's pretty gruesome, but
It's
a really good analogy. I'm really proud of that one. Whip that one right out of thin air.
like it. Love it. No, but so you were hospitalized, but then of course you had to start doing all the things, getting on medication, going to therapy, like putting in the work. How long did it really take you to kind of get out of psychosis and then be able to start to heal from all of it?
I exited psychosis pretty quickly. I actually probably exited psychosis like in the hospital because of the medication they put me on was an antipsychotic.
Oh, good.
But I became a zombie, an exhausted zombie
Yeah.
because of how high they had me. Like, they medicated me really deep. Um, I got into a psychiatrist about 4 weeks after my release, and they immediately like lowered that dosage and put me on a different medication that we would start weaning onto and weaning off this one. They got me on this medication and it was not enough. So then they got me on a mood stabilizer with it. And I was on a nightmare medication because my PTSD was so bad. I was just like, my nightmares, I was having nightmares every night. They were just taunting me. And I was so grateful to hear there was such thing as a nightmare medication.
The trazodone?
No, but I took trazodone for sleep. I was on something else for the nightmares.
Specifically?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was on a sleeping medication to make sure I got enough sleep because I had insomnia from it and anxiety falling asleep. And then I was on a medication that literally was just specific for nightmares that I took at night. It is actually a form of, I think they said, a seizure medication that like calms this
brain activity,
your nervous system, like brain inactivity. And what they found in kids with PTSD in foster care and in orphanages, it took away night terrors for them.
Wow.
Which is how they accidentally found the connection. So it was actually, it's a really sweet story looking back. I became stable right before my son's second birthday. And so we really used his second birthday as a time to just really celebrate life. Like I exited psychosis, in the January, but I was still so depressed and I just didn't have the will to live still.
Yeah.
I say now that like looking back, I thought I was choosing to live when I walked in the hospital. I was just still choosing not to die. And it wasn't.
There's a difference there. There is a big difference there.
It was not until I actually had a near-death experience 18 months later that I chose to live. My story is so complex. So my son, right before his second birthday, he was born the end of July. Everything just in an instant, the cloud was gone. And it was like all the work I'd done in therapy in an instant caught up with me. And I was just healed. And I just started crying and I looked at my husband and I was like, I know this makes no sense. But in this moment, that cloud that has been haunting me is gone and it's not coming back. And it hasn't. So we really celebrated my son's second birthday. It was really special to me. It was the first time I really experienced loving him and feeling love with him and bonding with him. And then 6 weeks after I became stable, maybe 7 weeks after I became stable, is when I went in paralysis. My watch just spoke to me. So I went in paralysis in the September of 2019. And
so you had just healed from one thing, barely, just to have something else come and hit you from nowhere too. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so then I went through, just like the searching for answers. I knew it wasn't the depression because I was happy. I was finally stable. So I had no doubt that it was like no depression. It wasn't psychosis. Like they just saw I was hospitalized and they were just like, oh, it's that. We need to put you back in inpatient until you learn to walk again. You're just depressed. I was like, no, I'm not. My head's falling off. Like,
you're like, even when I was severely depressed, like I still got up. I still took care of my kids. I still did all the things. This is not that.
Yeah, I don't have a migraine from depression. I can't like feel my body. Like they literally like took a clothespin, a push pin, and pushed all the way up my body. I felt nothing until my face.
Wow.
I had known about like Chiari malformation was in my family, which is your brain sliding into your spinal cord. And so I was pretty sure I had Chiari malformation. I was pretty sure I had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, also known as EDS. and that I had cranial cervical instability. But I had to find the doctors that could diagnose this stuff correctly. So then I would go to my family care doctor and I'd say, I need these tests ordered. They don't have them in Utah. I need to go to Colorado. I need to go to Nevada. And then I need to send all this stuff off to these surgeons. The 2 surgeons in America declined my case. And that was okay with me because the surgeon I really wanted was in Barcelona. Out of the 5 surgeons in the world at the time that could do it, I really wanted the doctor in Spain. And so the week of Thanksgiving, I sent off my package, my questionnaire, all my imaging to him, and just waited. The week of Christmas, my health declined really fast again. It's hard to imagine that you can decline more than that when you are in paralysis, living in a neck brace on crutches, but you can. And so I sent his assistant an email. I just really felt prompted to. I wrote her an email saying, hey, like, these are my new symptoms. This is what's going on. Could you update my package? And on New Year's Eve, I get an email back from the surgeon. And he is confirming what I suspected, confirming the diagnoses, but he even has another one on top of there that I wasn't aware of. And it was my skull was unstable on my neck. So I had ataloaxial instability. So my skull wasn't attached properly. My cervical spine was loosey-goosey and not attached properly and had collapsed on itself. So it had cut off the communication in my body, which is why all the wacko symptoms happened, is my nervous system and my spinal cord was being affected.
You said when you were in the hospital, you had complete paralysis, couldn't even talk, anything like that. Did it like slowly start coming back, or did like was there something that just like shifted it back into place so it wasn't as bad?
Yeah, I skipped this part. So I came home from the hospital still in paralysis. I could speak occasionally, like sometimes things would just like line up and I could talk a little bit, but it was very slow and robotic. And I could sometimes move my arms. Once I got home, I did some research that night and I overnighted myself a neck brace, the hard Vista neck brace. And once I got that on and elevated my neck, we just joked I had a giraffe neck.
Stabilized everything.
And stabilized it. It elevated the vertebrae just enough that like I could start to move my feet like a couple inches off the ground like this. I would lay on my back and I'd like lift them 3 inches and I'm like, okay, time to learn to walk again. My husband's like, you can move your feet 3 inches. And I was like, yeah, that's a good start. I call up my mom. I was like, hey mom, I'm back from the hospital and I need you to bring me forearm crutches. And she's like, what? I was like, yeah.
Like, you're paralyzed. Like, what?
Yeah. And my husband was just like, look, if you don't show up with them, she'll call someone else. So you might as well be the person to show up with them. And she's like, okay. So she shows up in a couple hours with the forearm crutches. And we like read them instructions. We set them to the right height. And I could not stand up off the couch. I could not like get up. And I was like, babe, help me up. And Grant, like, I'm in so much pain at this point. Like, I'm at a level 9.5. Okay. I'm living in sunglasses because my eyes hurt. They feel like there's like atomic bombs going off. And they help me up off the couch and get me like balanced on the forearm crutches. And I start like moving. And then I like lift up one foot and like drag it. Move the next crutch, lift up the other foot. Just barely like drag it. And I like do this process. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm walking. And they're like, that's what you want to call it, you know?
Like the resilience within you that you're like, I am going to get up. I'm going to walk again. Like, I will make it through this is probably a massive reason why you did make it through that, to be able to even like advocate for yourself and get yourself into the right doctor. I
think most people would have been like, they sent me home with a wheelchair prescription. And I was like, we ain't feeling that. I was like, we getting crutches. No one's putting me in a wheelchair yet. And it's so like that is just that crazy wild determination. Like unprecedented, like just nothing tame about it.
Yeah. Well,
Fully illogical.
and that's where it's so crazy to think about your story, because just like a couple months before, you hadn't
didn't
even
live.
wanted to live.
Yeah.
And now you were like fighting and like so determined to live. And that just shows like how big of a shift you went through in such a small amount of time.
Yeah. I constantly just said, I did not just survive that to die now. God is not done with me yet. There is no way in hell I survived 18 months with a demon to die now. I'm not giving up. My story is not over yet. So
That is so
we then met with the doctor January 2020 over Zoom at like 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah, because they're on Barcelona time.
Yeah. I was their first American patient. So they like didn't catch that I wasn't also a European at first when they set up the Zoom call. He's like, I'm so sorry. We could have at least pushed it back 2 hours.
You're like,
And
I'm so happy to even be able to get in with you that I will do it at 3:30 in the morning.
Yep. In my bed. And then we got the price back, and my husband looks at it. He goes, "We'll just sell our house." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, we'll just sell our house to pay for it. Like, that's the only way we can afford it." So we listed our house, and at like the 11th hour, we got an offer, and it was going to close and fund 2 days before we had to pay in full for my surgery.
What a miracle.
So we get that money, we wire it for my surgery, and March 17th, 2020, we're moving out of our house. And we are moving into a 1-bedroom basement apartment with our 4 kids. And it was a Friday. And it was that Friday, Utah shut down for 2 weeks. 2 weeks for COVID-19. And in the same weekend, my kids lost their school routine and their house. And I was supposed to be flying out in about 10 days for surgery. And we were just like crossing our fingers. And one night my husband said, "Babe, what if your surgery gets canceled?" And I was like, "I know, I've thought about it, but like, God would not put that chapter in my book at this point after everything I've been through. There is no way God would do that to me." It was not like 2 days later, I get a phone call, not an email, from Barcelona. And I was like, oh shit. And they were just like, "We did not want to send this over email. We're so sorry. Our country's been shut down. Our hospital's been shut down. And we have to cancel your surgery." And I was supposed to fly out in like 7 or 10 days or something. That was like a one week away from flying out for my surgery. I was like 20 days away from surgery. Not even 20 days away from surgery. And I was like, oh, I knew it was going to happen. And I was like at peace with it because God had not failed me yet. And he was not done with me yet. And then on the day I was supposed to have surgery, I had a near-death experience in my physical therapist's office. And I had been having instability seizures this whole time. They look like a normal seizure, basically, and I go unconscious like a seizure. But they're from the instability in the cervical spine.
Yeah.
And they're not really neurological as much. I won't go in great depths with this. Like, if you want the details, go grab my book. This is like one of the best chapters. But ultimately, I died. And it was not what I thought it would be like at all. There was no like angels greeting me or family members. It was just like pitch black. And there was an angel that showed up and was like speaking to me. But like they weren't talking out loud. They were just like talking to my mind. And they just said, "Brooke, it's not your time yet. We really need you to go back." And they're like, "But We can't make you go back. You're already here.
Hmm.
Your choice. But your story is not over yet. There's still things for you to do. And I chose to come back to my body in paralysis, in the pain. I was in so much pain that day. It was like really brutal. I chose to come back in the waiting and the unknown. I had no idea what my surgery was going to be. I didn't know how much worse I was going to get. I came back to my body and I chose to live life, even with paralysis, even with the migraine, even with the unknowing. And I'm so grateful that I did. And I didn't think about this experience for years because I really didn't know what to think of it. Because I was like, that was not like any other near-death experience I've heard of. Where's the white lights and the bridge and
Right.
where's all the family? Like, I was like, that was so weird. But it really changed how I showed up from then on. And that is when I actually chose to live life. So I did end up getting my surgery in June of 2020, still in the middle of pandemic. Barcelona opened up for like 7 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. And I was there for 6 of them. I barely made it home before the country closed again. And then like I had just a very roller coaster healing, very unpredictable. I found out afterwards that I actually had Lyme's disease and I contracted it when I was 12. And that was one of the root causes for my deterioration and for my chronic illness for all those years. I started treating my Lyme's disease naturally with a doctor in Mexico. And I have found like great healing from that. I contribute like being able to get out of the neck brace a lot to finally healing my Lyme's disease, because Lyme's disease is attacking all the ligaments, all your organs, all your systems. And as long as there's a fire going, your body can't fully heal. So until I put that fire out, like my body really struggled fully healing from my surgery, which totally makes sense.
Yeah. What was that like for you when you finally like got the surgery and you started that healing process? Because again, the surgery itself was kind of just that band-aid that started the healing process, but then you had so much work to do after that still.
Yeah, that was like actually the starting point.
Yeah.
That was so incredibly, every day just felt like a miracle. I was sitting up within like 2 days of surgery.
Wow.
I was walking unassisted on day like 3 with my pole IV. I remember sitting up the first time and putting my feet on the floor, and I could feel the texture of the floor and I could feel cold. I had lost like all my temperature gauge. Like I was scalding my mouth all the time and I was burning myself on water and I was cutting my skin with scissors, not knowing I cut myself. Like I had no feeling in my body. So it was so bizarre, like to feel texture of fabric, to feel the feeling of people touching me, to feel the temperature of the floor, of the first time my husband leaned in and kissed me after I woke up. I was like, your breath is warm. And he's like, well, yeah. I was like, how long have I been losing my temperature gauge? I was like, I don't remember breath being warm.
That's crazy.
Um,
But it's
every
so
day.
cool that you kind of get the time to like re-examine just like how those small tiny moments are actually very like significant, and like it brings a new level of appreciation to like everything.
It really does. And that's why every day was such a miracle to me.
Yeah.
The first time I felt hunger again, like I didn't even feel hunger for months. Feeling thirsty again, like not being a fall risk. All these things like were so crazy. I was able to walk to the grocery store down the street and help buy groceries after my surgery. I mean, it was like 2 weeks after my surgery, but I was walking without crutches.
Yeah.
Like after my surgery. I never used them again except for, I mean, I carried them with me on my travel home, just because I couldn't really pack those in the suitcase anymore. Um, so I did like have those, but like I just have never used them since my surgery. I just woke up from surgery being able to walk again.
That's amazing. Well, and
Uh,
there are so many like points in your story that like it just seems like miracle after miracle after miracle.
yes, no doubt. If people like question if miracles still happen, or they just question if God exists, there's just no way that he doesn't, you know? There's just no way that I don't have someone upstairs looking out for me.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
not here by my own strength.
You do have a lot of strength though to be able to get through that, you know, even with God on your side. The
Yeah.
strength and determination that it takes to be able to like push through so many obstacles in such a short period of time. And now you're here and you're not wearing a brace and you have beautiful little boys running around and being crazy and like, you know, you're writing your book to share your story and just show that you can make it through and there is, you know, hope in that healing process.
Yeah. And that is like, I think like the biggest message is just like hope. Don't don't ever give up on hope, and don't ever give the doctors and your prognosis the power. Like I'm running again and I should have been in a wheelchair. I actually should have become paralyzed in childbirth every time because of like my Chiari malformation. My brain was already slipping into my spinal cord at that point. I should have been paralyzed from giving birth naturally.
And you did it 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane.
So just there, like I was told Lyme's disease is a lifelong diagnosis. I cured it in 2 years. I was told so many things, you know, like these things are going to control your life, but they don't.
Yeah. What advice now, kind of where you're at with your healing and just your journey in its entirety, looking back, would you say to the version of you that was right in the middle of going through all of those things?
To the me who was in psychosis, I would say you'll feel joy again. I was so terrified of just never feeling joy again and never loving my kids again or never experiencing joy in motherhood again. It was really a huge fear of mine. So to me in psychosis, I'd say you'll feel joy again and you'll find purpose in and outside of motherhood. To the me in chronic illness, I would say, honestly, like, I'm proud of you. You're doing it right. And in time, what you're going through will impact others. It will make a difference. So just keep showing up the best you can every day for yourself and for your family. And that's all you can ask. That's really all you can ask.
That's so
And
good and so beautiful. And I think through just like listening to your journey and kind of all of the things that you've been through, for me, it definitely shows like that there are little miracles that we can find in every single day, no matter what we're going through. And like you said, like in time, you can take these really hard, really difficult, really awful periods of your life and turn them into something beautiful that's helping yourself and your others to like really be able to heal and progress. And I just think it's amazing, you know, that you've been able to do that.
thank you. I think like the biggest thing on this side of it all is I'm just really proud of myself. And I think I would have been like so ashamed or embarrassed of that emotion prior to all these years of experience.
Yeah.
Isn't that so interesting?
Yeah.
But like the shame of going through psychosis or experiencing it nearly killed me. And learning from that, the only way to break shame, the power shame holds, is to speak it out loud.
Absolutely.
And so I just don't let emotions and things hold that much power over me anymore. I will never keep silence because of shame again. And so I am just so proud of myself. I really am. I am proud to have survived it. I am proud to still be here, to have found healing beyond that, and to be a present mother in my kids' lives, and to be healed enough to be able to homeschool them this year. Even on a bad day, that's a miracle. Every day, it's a freaking miracle.
Well, that's so beautiful. And what a beautiful message for yourself and for all of the people that are listening to this right now. And I just have to say, I'm so proud of you. And I am so grateful that I get to know you and have you in my life. And you're just such an inspiration. And you're wonderful. So, for those that want to get to know you a little bit more and kind of see the inside of your life now, where can we find you? What is your book and when's it coming out? All of the good things.
So my book my book will be released in October. So by the time this comes out, my book will be live.
Yeah.
Yay, it's out. You can find it through Amazon. It will eventually be on Audible. I don't know quite yet when it will be released on Audible, but it was coming. So you can find it on Amazon. It's called Through Fire and Grace by Brooke Andersen. And you can follow me along on Instagram. My handle is at live, LIVE _ even with. And I am super active on Instagram. That's the best way to connect. You can also follow me on Facebook, but there's like 1,000 Brooke Andersens out there, guys. So Good luck.
Like one of the most common names probably out there.
I know. My maiden name wasn't as common, but getting married.
Yeah, that would do it. Well, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story, and for being a part of our community. I'm so glad that we got to have you here. So thank you, Brooke.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mompreneur podcast. And if you like this episode as much as we did, give us a follow so we can invite you back every Wednesday. And of course, share it on all your socials. Being a confident mompreneur means uncovering your strengths and struggles so you can dive in and learn how your next steps could be your greatest.